I know I should be studying, especially with school, but instead, I keep choosing to read at home. Right now, I'm reading several fiction series and literary fiction novels like the Odyssey or Circe, and fiction is distracting me from everything else. And that leads me to wonder, why are we so endlessly fascinated by fiction? And it doesn't really have to be books. It can be films, movies, or cartoons. I started thinking about this from my own perspective. I'm only 12, so it makes sense that I spend hours reading fiction because I'm a little bit childish. But then many adults stop reading stories altogether because they think it's a waste of time. And yet, why do some of us, regardless of age, spend hours reading about people who do not exist? If you look at the screen, you'll probably recognize at least one of these stories. Maybe even one you thought about long after you finished it. We know the characters are fictional. We know the events never happened, and yet we still care. Some people care enough to spend their entire afternoon in an online argument about whether the character's choice in chapter 12 was logical. That's a massive amount of emotional energy to spend on someone who's essentially just ink and imagination. So, what is going on in our brains when we read fiction? From a scientific perspective, our brains are surprisingly easy to trick. Brain imaging studies, especially fMRI scans, shows that when we read about actions or emotions, your brain doesn't just process the text like a computer. It reenacts the experience. For example, if a character is running, the motor cortex, the part of your brain connected with physical movement, activates. You are technically getting a neurological exercise while sitting perfectly still in a chair. And if a character feels embarrassed, your own social emotion centers will respond. This suggests that fiction works as a simulator. It allows the brain to practice complex situations, high-stakes social interactions, and even dangerous scenarios, all without the real-world risk of messing up. Psychology gave us another clue, a concept called theory of mind. Theory of mind is the ability to understand that other people have thoughts, beliefs, and feelings that are different from our own. It is our survival skill for social interaction. Without it, we won't be able to navigate a conversation, let alone a workplace or a classroom. In 2013, researchers David Kidd and Emmanuel Castano at New School tested whether reading fiction affects your social performance. They split participants into groups. Some read literary fiction, the kind of complex books where you have to guess what the other people are thinking, while others read nonfiction or popular thrillers, where the plot is a little bit more straightforward. The literary fiction group performed significantly better on tests designed to measure empathy and social decoding. Why? Because literary fiction doesn't explain everything. It doesn't say John was sad, for example, but this is exaggerated. It says John stared at his coffee for 40 minutes straight. And at that point, we all know something's wrong. As a reader, you must do the mental work to diagnose John's internal state. In this sense, reading is less of a hobby and more of a way of understanding human behavior. And now back to the main point. Why is fiction so appealing? There's a logical, structural reason why fiction is interesting for us. But this is in my own opinion, so it might differ from person to person. Life is often disorganized. Real life doesn't always have a satisfying ending. Events can be random or they just stop without a resolution. Stories, however, have a specific architecture. They have cause, effect, and resolution. Evolutionarily, humans are pattern-seeking primates. We all love organization, no doubt, even if we can't maintain them and we go back to our messy selves. And we also like to give our brain cells a rather straightforward activity. We are wired to look for systems that make sense because in the wild, recognizing a pattern could be the difference between finding food and becoming food. Stories also cut a lot of mess you find in real life. Life is noisy and complicated. But in fiction, the writer only gives you what you need to know. That makes it way easier for your brain to stick with the plot and get what's going on. Fiction provides a version of reality that's complex, but actually follows a set of rules. And most people like rules. It satisfies a brain's need for order in a way that daily news or our own lives often couldn't. So, in conclusion, why is fiction appealing? It's not magic, it's how our brains work, simulating experiences, spotting patterns, predicting outcomes, and reading intentions. Fiction grasps it because our minds are wired to make sense of things, and fiction taps straight into that, unlike real life. Thank you for your attention.